My daughter-in-law waited until she thought I had removed my hearing aids before telling my son I was taking too long to die. I was sitting 12 feet away. My son did not defend me. He only told her to lower her voice. Sunday dinner had ended 20 minutes earlier. I sat in the living room facing the front window, while Daniel and Sabrina carried coffee cups into the kitchen. Rose's silver hearing aid case lay open on the table beside me. My large old devices rested inside their molded slots. Sabrina saw both of them in the case and assumed silence had made me harmless. "Your father is living too long," she whispered. My fingers tightened around the arm of my chair. I loosened them one at a time before either of them could return to the living room. Daniel did not answer. "We wait until he dies, then the house is ours. We sell before Ethan starts talking about keeping it for sentimental reasons." My son finally spoke. "Keep your voice down," Sabrina laughed. "He can't even hear the microwave." What neither of them knew was that the hearing aids inside my ears were new, smaller than the old pair, stronger too. Dr. Priyasha had fitted them 3 days earlier. They sat deep enough that Sabrina could not see them from the kitchen. For the first time in years, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the next room. I heard the spoon touch the side of her coffee cup. I heard Daniel choose silence while his wife measured my remaining life against the price of my home. In architecture, a visible crack is rarely the beginning of a failure. It is only the first place the hidden strain reaches the surface. Sabrina's sentence was the crack. Daniel's silence told me the damage ran deeper. Rose had bought that case when I received my first hearing aids. My late wife had engraved 6 words inside the lid, for every word still worth hearing. I closed the case, then I turned toward the kitchen. "Did you say something, Sabrina?" She stepped into the living room with a smile already prepared. "Nothing important, Ernest." I nodded as though I had not heard her. That was the first lie I allowed her to believe. Over the next 6 weeks, it would become the most expensive one she ever told herself. Nothing in my face changed while she stood there. That took more effort than pretending not to hear. My first instinct was to repeat her sentence loudly enough for Daniel to understand what his silence had cost him. But anger would have given them an easy defense. Sabrina would claim frustration. Daniel would call it dark humor. Both would become careful before I knew whether they were waiting for an inheritance or already trying to reach it. So I let Sabrina return to the kitchen, believing hearing loss had removed me from my own family conversation. The house she was waiting to inherit was the craftsman home Rose and I had bought more than 40 years earlier. We had rebuilt it room by room. I was a young civil architect then. Rose taught elementary school and believed any building could become a home if the people inside it were willing to repair more than walls. I built the workshop cabinets. Rose planted a pear tree beside the kitchen window and saved space for a table large enough for the family we hoped to have. Daniel grew up at that table. Daniel's height marks remained inside the pantry door, and his first bicycle still hung in my workshop. Years later, Rose taught Ethan and Lucy to roll dough on the same counter where Sabrina had just discussed my death. Rose had been gone 3 years. Her pear tree still bore fruit, and the garden produced more tomatoes than I could eat. Her recipes remained beside the stove. The blue she chose for the dining room had faded near the windows. But I had never wanted another color. Sabrina saw $1,350,000. That was the latest estimate for a mortgage-free house in a neighborhood where homes had become investment opportunities. Under my old estate plan, Daniel would receive the house when I died. Ethan and Lucy would receive education funds and personal gifts. Daniel had been named successor for several financial responsibilities because I believed a son who had grown up in the house would understand why it should remain a home. Rose had not been as certain. During our last estate review, she suggested placing the property in trust for the grandchildren. A house should go to the person who sees a home, she told me, not the person who sees the price. I defended Daniel. I said he would sell only if keeping the house stopped making sense for his family. When I told him the house would become his, I meant after my life ended naturally. He heard only the destination. I had never considered that he might begin spending the inheritance before it arrived. The old plan also placed him close to financial control. He would have handled several estate responsibilities and could have influenced what happened while Ethan and Lucy were still young. Those choices had been built on trust, not on a debt calculation I had never seen. Rose did not argue. She wrote herself a note and placed it with our estate papers. I had not read it since her death, sitting beside the silver hearing aid case. I began to wonder whether she had heard something in Daniel that I had refused to hear in time. I did not confront him after Sunday dinner. One cruel conversation could be denied. Sabrina could call it a joke. Daniel could say he froze. They could tell Ethan and Lucy that a lonely old man had misunderstood a whisper. I needed to know whether my son had merely failed to defend me, or had already begun spending the house in his mind. So I continued placing the large old hearing aids in Rose's open silver case whenever family visited. The new pair remained deep inside my ears, almost impossible to see. Sometimes I asked someone to repeat a sentence, or turned my head as though a distant voice had disappeared. I never claimed I was confused. I simply stopped correcting people who spoke around me as though I no longer counted. They mistook my silence for absence. The following Tuesday, Daniel arrived with a folder and asked whether I had considered reducing my household responsibilities. He sat across from me at Rose's dining table and spoke louder than necessary. "You have a lot to manage here, Dad." "I have managed it for 42 years. That is the point. You should not have to." Sabrina placed a brochure beside my plate. The cover showed a smiling gray-haired couple walking through a senior living courtyard. "This place has meals, transportation, and medical support if you ever need it," she said. "You could move before maintaining this house becomes a burden." "A burden to whom?" She glanced at Daniel. "To you." Of course, I turned one of the new devices down with a touch and asked her to repeat herself. She moved closer and raised her voice. "We only want you safe." The sentence was meant for me. The whisper that followed was meant for Daniel. "If he moves voluntarily, the transfer will look cleaner." Daniel gave a small nod. He did not ask what transfer she meant. That answered one of my questions. 2 days later, I heard them discussing their renovation business in the hallway. Daniel and Sabrina had spent years remodeling expensive kitchens for clients who wanted their homes to resemble hotels. 6 months earlier, their largest project had collapsed after a financing dispute. They had always described the problem as temporary. That afternoon, Sabrina used a different word. "The creditors will start filing before winter. If we lose the business, every client and contractor we know will see exactly how far we have fallen." Daniel asked how much time they had. "Not enough unless we get access to the house. Dad will not sell. He does not have to sell. He transfers it to you, we refinance, and we decide later." Their business owed approximately $310,000. My house had become the loan application they were waiting for me to stop breathing long enough to sign. I had helped them start that business. I reviewed their first lease, corrected structural drawings without charging them, and introduced Daniel to 2 contractors who gave him favorable terms because they trusted my judgment. When the largest project failed, Daniel told me cash flow was tight. He did not tell me creditors were closing in or that my unencumbered house had become the answer written into their private projections. The debt did not explain Sabrina's cruelty. It explained why Daniel had decided not to challenge it. At the next Sunday dinner, Ethan arrived early and joined me in the workshop. He was 19 and studying architecture. He cared more about the old hand-drawn plans stored in my flat files than the market value printed on any appraisal. "Grandma drew this garden path," he asked. She corrected my drawing. "That is not the same thing." He laughed and began sorting tracing paper by date. I did not tell him what his parents had said. Ethan had not asked for the house, and I would not turn him into evidence against his father. Lucy came later with a bag of groceries and complained that my refrigerator contained 3 kinds of mustard but no actual lunch. She was 16, impatient, and better at remembering Rose's recipes than she admitted. I did not tell her either. If I changed anything, it would be because I chose to protect them, not because they had been recruited to flatter me. During dinner, Sabrina praised both children for caring about family tradition. "This house should stay in the family for them," she said. Ethan looked toward the dining room trim rose, and I had repaired. Then nobody should gut it just to raise the resale price. Sabrina's fork stopped. No one is discussing resale. She waited until Ethan left the table before leaning toward Daniel. "That is why we sell before he thinks sentiment gives him a vote." I heard every word. The next step arrived disguised as insurance. Daniel called on Thursday and said the carrier needed updated measurements because construction costs had risen. He asked whether an appraiser could visit the following morning. I agreed. The man who arrived carried a laser measure, a camera, and a valuation form that had nothing to do with insurance replacement cost. His paperwork identified the purpose as potential financing and transfer planning. Daniel had signed the appointment request. I let the appraiser walk through the house because I wanted to hear what Daniel and Sabrina said when they believed the process was already moving. They stood with him in the dining room while I sat near the window with Rose's case open beside me, the old devices visible inside. Sabrina pointed toward the built-in cabinets. "Those can come out. Buyers want a cleaner wall." She marked the flooring for replacement and said the studio could become a primary bedroom. She measured Rose's sewing alcove for storage cabinets and photographed the workshop entrance, as though my tools were clutter waiting to be removed. Daniel asked for an estimate based on a quick renovation and sale within 6 months. The appraiser looked toward me. "Has the owner approved a sale?" Daniel answered before I could. "He is arranging an early family transfer. We are helping him avoid probate." I turned my head toward the window. Sabrina lowered her voice. "Once the deed is in Daniel's name, we refinance before the business creditors catch up." The appraiser stopped writing. "I will need authorization from the current owner before this report can support any transaction." "Of course," Sabrina said. "He trusts us." I had trusted them. That was not the same thing. The appraiser looked uncomfortable, but he did not argue with her in front of me. He continued recording measurements, while Daniel discussed the quickest improvements for resale. Each room became a number. Rose's garden became curb appeal. My workshop became square footage that could be converted after my tools were removed. After they moved upstairs, I asked the appraiser for his card and a copy of the appointment request. I spoke quietly and clearly. His eyes moved toward the old devices resting in Rose's silver case. "Mr. Caldwell, do you understand why I was asked to value this property? Better than the people who invited you." He handed me both documents. That evening, Sabrina remained after Daniel and the appraiser left. She walked through Rose's garden with her phone, photographing the pear tree, the path, and the workshop roof. From the kitchen, I heard her call a contractor. "I need preliminary room measurements for a fast resale renovation," she said. "The owner is elderly, and the family transfer should happen soon." She believed the house would become hers when I stopped breathing. By the end of the week, she had already hired someone to measure the rooms. The first document my son asked me to sign did not protect my house. It would have let him begin controlling it while I was still living there. Daniel placed the folder beside my breakfast plate. 3 days after the appraiser measured Rose's rooms for a sale I had never approved, the title on the first page sounded official. Daniel made it sound protective. Durable power of attorney for property and financial affairs. "This is only for emergencies, Dad," he said loudly. "If something happens, I can pay bills and handle repairs without waiting for a court." I read the first paragraph slowly while Sabrina watched my face. The power was not limited to emergencies. It allowed Daniel to negotiate contracts, manage real property, access financial information, and act in transactions involving the house. "Where is the emergency?" I asked. "There is not one yet." "Then why does a document you call an emergency need my signature today?" Sabrina moved closer, as though hearing loss had made written language difficult too. "It keeps the family from going through probate if your health changes." "My health has not changed. We are planning ahead." She placed a pen across the signature line. I looked at it, then at Daniel. "Leave the papers. I will read them." He hesitated. "The notary can come Friday." "Then the notary can wait." Daniel took the pen but left the folder. As they walked toward the kitchen, Sabrina whispered, "Once he signs this, the deed transfer becomes easier." Daniel answered, "He is more suspicious than you said. He cannot hear us. He is reacting to the paper." They still believed the only useful part of me was the signature at the bottom of a page. I photographed every sheet after they left and locked the originals in my workshop safe. The appraisal request from the previous week identified potential financing and transfer planning. The new power of attorney gave Daniel broad control over property. Together, the documents told a clearer story than Sabrina's whisper about waiting for my death. They were trying to move the inheritance closer. I continued pretending not to understand how much I heard. People reveal more when they believe the person in front of them no longer counts. Sabrina returned 2 days later, with color samples and adhesive labels. She told me they were for organizing repairs. Then she began walking from room to room, placing small marks beneath furniture and on cabinet doors. Green meant keep, yellow meant store. Red meant remove. Rose's dining table received a yellow mark. The cabinet containing her serving dishes received red. The bench beneath the front window, which I had built for her during our first winter, received another red label. "Why are you marking my furniture?" I asked. Sabrina turned toward me and exaggerated each word. "For future maintenance." Then she called Daniel from the hallway. "Most of Rose's things can go into storage before listing photos. He will never notice half of this is gone." I stood less than 15 feet away. The new hearing aids picked up every word. She opened the drawers where Rose had kept table linens and photographed the silver serving pieces. She measured the wall above the piano and said a buyer would prefer neutral art. When Daniel asked what should happen to the family photographs, Sabrina said they could be scanned before the originals were boxed. "Do not throw anything away until the deed is done," Daniel told her. That was the first precaution he took on my behalf. Not because the objects mattered, but because he did not want me noticing their disappearance before I signed. Rose had selected every object slowly. Sabrina reduced the room to what would photograph well after I was removed from it. I removed each label after she left and placed them in an envelope with the date. It was not evidence for a criminal case. It was evidence for me. I needed to remember that the woman calling herself my caretaker had already sorted my wife's life into keep, store, and remove. The financial plan arrived through an email Daniel mistakenly copied to me. He had asked a lender whether an inherited or gifted property valued near $1,350,000 could support a rapid refinance after title transfer. The projected loan would cover $310,000 in business debt, $95,000 in renovation costs, and reserves for a smaller condominium. Ethan and Lucy appeared only in a note labeled Future Family Assistance. There was no amount beside it. Daniel and Sabrina told relatives they wanted to preserve the Caldwell house for their children. Their own projection assumed the house would be sold within 6 months. They were using the children's names to justify a plan that gave them nothing. At Sunday dinner, Daniel repeated the family story for my sister and 2 cousins. "We are trying to make sure the house stays protected for Ethan and Lucy," he said. "Dad is ready to simplify things." I cut my roast and asked, "When did I say that?" Daniel raised his voice. "You said maintaining the house is becoming difficult." "No, You said that. Sabrina touched his arm. Ernest, no one is making decisions without you. The power of attorney folder remained locked in my safe while she said it. Ethan looked from his parents to me. Grandpa, I never asked anyone to preserve the house for me. I know. Sabrina smiled too quickly. This is not about giving you anything now. It is about family planning. Lucy asked whether I wanted to move. No. Daniel changed the subject. Later, I heard him tell Sabrina the children had made the conversation harder. Ethan will fight the renovation if he thinks Grandpa wants the workshop preserved, he said. Daniel was quiet for several seconds. It is Dad's house, Sabrina. If he thinks we are forcing him, he will call a lawyer. We owe $310,000. You can protect his feelings, or you can protect your children. He has not agreed to sell. He does not have to. We keep saying the transfer is for Ethan and Lucy. They do not need details until the debt is gone. Another silence followed. Then the power of attorney has to look temporary, Daniel said. My son had not been dragged across a line he could not see. He had measured it, argued about the distance, and stepped over it himself. The debt was theirs. The future belonged to Ethan and Lucy. Daniel and Sabrina had found a sentence that allowed them to exchange one for the other without admitting what they were doing. That was why I kept the children outside my response. If I warned them, their parents would force them to defend a plan they had never seen or accuse them of manipulating me for a larger inheritance. I did not tell either child about the refinance proposal. I would not force them to choose between their grandfather and their parents at a dinner table. Rose had built around keeping family together. The next morning, Dr. Priya Shah tested both new devices and documented that I could understand normal conversation in a quiet room at the distances I had described. Hearing loss changes how information reaches a person, she said. It does not determine what that person can understand. She referred me for an independent capacity evaluation. I identified my assets, explained the old plan, and my proposed changes, and named who might gain or lose control. I also explained why Ethan and Lucy knew nothing. The physician recorded that I understood the property, the people involved, and the consequences. No one was coercing me, and hearing impairment had not affected my judgment. She asked why I had waited before confronting Daniel. Because hearing one sentence told me they were cruel. Watching what followed told me they were acting on it. I showed her the power of attorney, appraisal request, and refinance projection. By explaining how they could expose my house to Daniel's debt, I created a record that my decision came from understanding, not anger, confusion, or pressure from my grandchildren. Only after that evaluation did I contact Claire Donovan, an elder law attorney Rose and I had consulted years earlier. I brought the silver hearing aid case, the old will, the appraisal request, Daniel's power of attorney, the refinance email, and the furniture labels. Claire read every document before the silver case mattered. I opened the lid. For every word still worth hearing. Rose gave it to me, I said. My family saw the old devices resting inside and decided I had stopped participating in my own life. Claire reviewed the old estate plan. The will left the house to Daniel. It also named him for financial responsibilities if I could not act. Ethan and Lucy received education funds, but their father would have influence over several decisions while they were young. A will says who receives property, Claire said. A trust can decide who is allowed to control it. She explained the weakness in plain language. If I died under the old plan, Daniel would receive the house outright. He could sell it, borrow against it, or use the proceeds for his business. Nothing required him to preserve it for his children. If I became ill before changing the documents, the broad authority he wanted me to sign could create an even earlier struggle over control. Can I protect the grandchildren without giving them the house now? I asked. Yes. You remain the owner and retain full control during your life. The grandchildren become beneficiaries only after your death, and an independent trustee manages the property under instructions you approve. Their parents. No authority to borrow, force a sale, or direct distributions. That was the distinction I needed. I did not want to give away my home to punish Daniel. I wanted to keep living there with the same authority I had always possessed. What changed was who would benefit when my ownership ended, and who would be trusted to protect it. Claire asked whether Rose had left any written guidance. I remembered the note I had seen years earlier. We opened the estate box in my workshop. Beneath the old will and a copy of the deed was an envelope in Rose's handwriting. The note was not a legal amendment. It did not control anything. It was a warning she had written for the next estate review. Daniel may inherit the house one day, but if its value ever matters more to him than the person still living inside it, review the plan before it is too late. I read it twice. Rose had not predicted this plan. She had only understood how quickly inheritance could distort love. I remembered the afternoon she wrote it. Daniel had left after asking whether we planned to update the house before he inherited it. I laughed because he was still young enough to treat every distant future as certain. Rose did not laugh. She asked what would happen if debt, marriage, or impatience changed him. I told her we had raised him better than that. The note did not prove Rose had been right about everything. It proved she had asked a question I had answered with hope instead of protection. "Do not change your plan because Rose feared something," Claire said. "Change it because you understand what is happening now." I do. We designed a revocable living trust. I would retain full ownership and control during my life. After my death, Ethan and Lucy would become beneficiaries under an independent professional trustee. Daniel and Sabrina could not borrow against the house, force a sale, direct distributions, or use the property to repair their business debt. The children would not be told until the documents were complete. Proving the decision came from me and not from either grandchild's influence. The following afternoon, Daniel called while I was leaving Claire's office. "I scheduled the title company for next Thursday," he said. "They can handle the family transfer and notarize the power of attorney at the same appointment." "What family transfer?" "The house, Dad. We have discussed this." "You discussed it," he exhaled sharply. "Please do not make this harder than it needs to be. Send me the appointment details." He mistook that request for agreement. Within 10 minutes, the title company emailed a confirmation stating Daniel would bring the owner in to transfer the Caldwell property. I forwarded it to Claire. Daniel believed he was bringing his father to sign away the house. My lawyer was already preparing the documents that would remove him from every line that mattered. While my son scheduled a dinner to transfer my house into his hands, I signed a deed placing it beyond his control. The title company appointment Daniel arranged never became his appointment. Claire Donovan contacted the company before I appeared. She confirmed that I had not authorized a transfer to Daniel and instructed them to preserve his request, the proposed documents, and every communication identifying him as my representative. Daniel had no signed authority to represent me. He had simply described my agreement until professionals began treating it as real. I did not walk into that office and argue with him. I went to Claire's office instead, where the documents reflected my actual decision. The first was the Rose Caldwell Revocable Living Trust. The deed transferred title from Ernest Caldwell individually to Ernest Caldwell as trustee of the revocable trust. The house remained mine to live in, maintain, sell, refinance, or remove from the trust. No one received it early, and Daniel gained no authority through expectation. My control did not end. Daniel's assumption did. Claire read every section aloud and gave me time to review the printed pages. An independent witness confirmed that I understood the property and the consequences. My capacity evaluation and hearing records were placed with the estate file. No one could later claim Ethan or Lucy had brought a confused grandfather to sign away his home. Neither child knew the meeting was happening. After my death, the remaining house and eligible assets would pass into the Caldwell Grandchildren Legacy Trust. Ethan and Lucy would be protected by written standards until they were mature enough to participate in decisions. If they kept the house, the trust could maintain it. If a future made sense, the proceeds would remain protected rather than flow through their parents. Miles Chen, a professional trust officer, accepted appointment as independent successor trustee. The grandchildren are beneficiaries, he said. Their parents are not managers simply because they are family. Daniel and Sabrina could not borrow against the property, force a sale, approve distributions, or use trust money to pay their business debt. Removing Daniel as successor trustee and financial agent required one sentence. Claire read it aloud. I had spent most of his life writing my son into the future of that house. It took less than a minute to remove his authority from it. Claire revoked the old documents in writing and stored the originals securely. We also placed a deed fraud alert on the property. Any attempted filing, transfer, or new lien would trigger immediate notice to me and Claire. Claire asked me to describe the plan once more without reading from her notes. I explained that the trust was revocable. I still controlled the house, and Miles would act only after my death or a properly documented incapacity. The safeguards mattered because protection can become another form of control if the owner does not understand it. I was not exchanging Daniel's pressure for a lawyer's authority. Every professional involved answered to instructions I had reviewed and could revoke. The record showed a 74-year-old man making a deliberate estate decision, not an angry father giving property away after one argument. The process took most of the afternoon. When I signed the last page, I placed Rose's open silver hearing aid case beside my hand. The large old devices rested in their molded slots, for every word still worth hearing. Rose had once asked me to protect the house from anyone who saw my life as a delay between themselves and the property. I had answered that concern with trust in Daniel. This time, I answered it with documents. They did not feel like revenge. They felt like new load-bearing walls placed around the years I had left. Miles closed the estate binder. Do you want the grandchildren informed? Not yet. They may be surprised later. Surprise is safer than making them defend me against their parents. My decision did not require Ethan or Lucy to praise me, move into the house, or choose my side. The trust protected a future without turning the children into participants in the fight that created it. Daniel learned the title appointment had been cancelled when he arrived with Sabrina and a notary. He called before leaving the parking lot. Dad, Claire told them not to process the transfer. Claire is my lawyer. You said to send the appointment details. I asked to see what you had scheduled in my name. We are trying to protect you from probate and unnecessary expense. Then bring me any document you want me to sign. He lowered his voice. Sabrina already announced to the family that we were handling this. The humiliation of being premature troubled him more than the fact that I had never consented. Then perhaps the family should hear what I actually intend, I said. Daniel became quiet. What does that mean? Arrange the family dinner you wanted. Bring your documents. I will bring mine. He heard agreement because he still believed my age, hearing loss, and desire for peace would carry me toward his signature line. Within an hour, he told relatives I had agreed to formalize the family plan. Sabrina sent invitations describing the dinner as a celebration of responsible generational stewardship. Neither used the word transfer in writing, but both told guests there would be an important signing. My sister called to congratulate me on keeping the house with Daniel. Did he tell you I was transferring it? I asked. He said you had finally decided to put the future in order. That part is true. I let Daniel's announcement stand. By dinner, every person he hoped would pressure me into signing would also be present to hear what I had actually done. Sabrina named it the Caldwell Family Legacy Dinner. She ordered champagne, printed photographs of the house, and prepared a sign for the dining room, Caldwell House. The next generation, Daniel invited my sister, two cousins, Ethan, Lucy, and the notary. I invited Claire and Miles. Daniel assumed Claire would notarize the transfer, and Miles was attending to discuss future estate administration. Neither corrected him. Dr. Priya Shah did not need to sit through a family confrontation. But her treatment records and statement remained in Claire's file if Daniel attacked my capacity. The week before the dinner, I continued behaving exactly as I had since the first whisper. I kept the old devices visible in Rose's open case and let Daniel and Sabrina mistake the sight for silence. Sometimes I asked a question twice or turned my head as though a distant voice had disappeared. I never pretended not to understand a document. I let them confuse hearing effort with mental weakness because that mistake belonged to them. They used the freedom carelessly. Sabrina rehearsed her speech in my dining room while I sat on the porch sorting mail. A family home should never become a burden, she said. Tonight, Ernest is making sure this house remains protected for the people who love him. Daniel told her the line about burden sounded too much like they wanted me gone. Then say responsibility, she replied. People like responsibility. Daniel planned to place the durable power of attorney for property and financial affairs in front of me after Sabrina's speech. The notary would already be present. Relatives would be watching. He believed I would sign rather than embarrass the family. Once he signs, we can handle the deed privately, Sabrina said. He may ask Claire to review it. Then we call it symbolic tonight and finish the filing later. Their plan did not depend on my informed consent. It depended on momentum, witnesses, and my reluctance to create conflict at Rose's table. 2 days before the dinner, Sabrina brought storage estimates to the house. She placed them beside the senior living brochure and began photographing Rose's furniture again. The dining set may be worth something, Daniel said. Not enough to justify the space. I stood in the hallway behind them. What space? I asked. Sabrina turned with the same smile she had worn after discussing my death. The extra space, Ernest. We were discussing how useful the workshop could be for Ethan. Ethan had never asked to take my workshop. Sabrina had already priced its conversion. I touched the nearly invisible device inside my right ear and nodded. I am glad you are thinking ahead. She believed I meant the transfer. I meant the trust. On the morning of the dinner, Claire confirmed the deed had been recorded in the trust's name. The fraud alert was active. Daniel's old authority had already been revoked. The unsigned power of attorney beside a champagne glass could give him nothing unless I signed it. Miles brought a plain estate binder. I brought Rose's silver case. Ethan arrived first and went to the workshop. He had brought a portfolio from his architecture class and wanted my opinion on a community library design. Are we really having a dinner about the house? He asked. We are having a dinner about what people think the house means. Mom says you are simplifying the estate. Your mother says many things when she expects me not to hear them. He studied my face but did not ask for more. Lucy came into the kitchen carrying Rose's recipe cards. She wanted to make the pear cake her grandmother used to serve in autumn. Sabrina told her there would not be time because the dining room needed to look formal. Grandma always served it at family dinners, Lucy said. Tonight is about the future. Lucy looked at the sign announcing the next generation. Whose future? Sabrina did not answer. My sister arrived next and asked Daniel whether the house would remain exactly as Rose had left it. He promised the family would preserve its character. From the hallway, Sabrina corrected him in a whisper. Do not promise exactly. We need flexibility for the sale. Daniel told her no one would remember the wording after champagne. They had invited relatives to witness a promise neither intended to keep. Ethan and Lucy were presented as the reason for the transfer, while the refinance projection treated them as an undefined obligation to be considered after the business debt was paid. Guests arrived at 6. Champagne waited beside Daniel's power of attorney folder. The notary sat near the end of the table. Claire and Miles took places across from Daniel and Sabrina. I sat in Rose's chair with the silver case open beside my plate. The large old devices rested visibly inside it. The new pair remained deep inside my ears. Sabrina noticed the old devices in the case and relaxed. Before everyone sat down, she leaned toward Daniel. "Once he signs, the house is finally useful." Daniel whispered, "Stop saying it like that. He cannot hear me. People speak most honestly when they believe the person beside them no longer counts." I had not gathered the family to shame Daniel and Sabrina for a whisper. They had organized the dinner, chosen the sign, invited the notary, and placed the power of attorney beside my plate. I had only made sure the documents protecting my home were completed before their performance began. Rose's silver case remained open beside my hand. 6 weeks earlier, seeing the old devices inside it had convinced Sabrina that I was absent. Now the same case sat at the center of a table where every person would soon learn how much I had heard. I waited because Sabrina had insisted on speaking first. After dinner, Sabrina stood beneath the sign she had ordered. "A family home should never become a burden," she said. "Tonight, Ernest is making sure this house remains protected for the people who love him." She praised herself and Daniel for helping me manage the responsibilities of age. She thanked Ethan and Lucy for inspiring the family to preserve the property. She did not mention the refinance projection that left them with no ownership. When she finished, Daniel placed the power of attorney in front of me. "Dad, this lets me take care of the property, so you never have to worry about it again." I looked down at the title, Durable Power of Attorney for Property and Financial Affairs. The same broad powers. The same emergency that did not exist, I asked. "What property?" Daniel leaned across Rose's table and raised his voice until every guest could hear him. "The house." I looked at my son and answered in my normal voice. "I heard you the first time. I heard you the first time." Daniel was still leaning across Rose's dining table when I answered in my normal voice. The room went silent. His hand remained on the durable power of attorney for property and financial affairs. Sabrina stood beneath the sign announcing the next generation. The notary looked from my son to me and slowly closed her stamp case. Daniel spoke first. "Then why did you ask what property?" "I wanted everyone else to hear how loudly you believed you needed to speak before I could understand you." I slid Rose's open silver hearing aid case into the center of the table. The large old devices rested inside their molded slots. Sabrina looked at them. "You are not wearing them." "I am not wearing the ones you can see." I touched the nearly invisible device inside my right ear. Dr. Shah fitted a new pair 6 weeks ago. They are smaller than the old devices and considerably better. Claire placed the audiology record beside her binder. It documented when the devices were fitted and confirmed that they allowed me to understand normal conversation at the distances I had described. The independent capacity evaluation confirmed something even more important. I understood my estate, my family, and every consequence of the changes I had made. Hearing loss affected how voices reached me. It had never made me incapable of understanding them. Daniel could not turn an invisible device into evidence of confusion, simply because he had failed to notice it. Sabrina's face changed as she began counting backward through every conversation she believed had been private. "That Sunday in the kitchen," I said, "you saw this case open beside me. These same old devices were inside it." I turned the open lid toward her, for every word still worth hearing. "You told my son I was living too long." "Ernest, I never said that. Your exact words were, 'Your father is living too long. We wait until he dies, then the house is ours.'" Daniel pushed his chair back. She was frustrated. It was a terrible joke. I looked at him. "You did not call it terrible." "I told her to stop." "No, you told her to lower her voice." My sister covered her mouth. Ethan stared at his father. Lucy looked toward the kitchen where the conversation had occurred. Sabrina tried to recover. "If you heard us, why did you pretend otherwise?" "I did not pretend because I was afraid to answer. I waited because people reveal more when they believe the person in front of them no longer counts. I opened the binder Claire had brought. One cruel sentence could have been denied. What followed could not. The first document was the appraisal request Daniel had signed. It identified potential financing and transfer planning, not an insurance review. The second was the lender projection, $310,000 for their business debt, $95,000 for a fast resale renovation, additional money for a smaller condominium. Ethan and Lucy appeared only under future family assistance, with no amount promised. The projection showed exactly where the house would go. Their business creditors were paid first. Renovation contractors were paid next. A condominium for Daniel and Sabrina followed. The amount left for the children depended on what remained after the sale and was not protected by any trust. Sabrina had used Ethan and Lucy in every conversation with relatives because preserving a home for children sounded better than selling a grandfather's house to rescue a failed business. The numbers removed that disguise. You told relatives you were preserving the house for your children, I said. Your own projection assumed it would be sold within 6 months. Ethan turned toward his parents. You said this was so the house would stay in the family. Daniel answered quickly. We would have made sure you and Lucy were taken care of. How? Daniel had no number to give him. I placed Sabrina's color labels beside the projection. Green for keep, yellow for storage, red for removal. Rose's table, her serving cabinet, and the bench I built for her were marked before I had signed a single document. Sabrina crossed her arms. The house needs updating. You are sitting on more than $1 million while the rest of the family is drowning. Your business debt does not make my home unused. We were trying to save what we built. With a house you plan to inherit from a man you were tired of waiting to bury. Daniel pointed toward the power of attorney. That document only lets me help manage the property. Claire Donovan opened her copy. It authorizes contracts, property management, financial access, and real estate transactions. It is broader than the explanation Mr. Caldwell received. The notary slid the unsigned pages away from Daniel. I cannot notarize this without informed consent, she said. There will be no consent, I replied. Claire placed the appraisal request, title appointment, refinance projection, and power of attorney in chronological order. That conversation in the kitchen did not change my estate plan by itself, I said. It explained every document Daniel brought afterward. Daniel's expression hardened. You always told me the house would be mine. I told you what I intended when I trusted you. You changed everything because my wife said one ugly thing. I changed it because you heard her measure my life against the property and then scheduled an appraisal, contacted a lender, arranged a title transfer, and asked me to sign control over the house. Sabrina looked toward Claire's binder. What did you change? Claire answered in language no one needed a law degree to understand. The old will has been revoked. The Caldwell house is now held in the Rose Caldwell Revocable Living Trust. Daniel stood. He gave the house away? No. Mr. Caldwell still controls the house. He can live here, sell, refinance, or change the trust. No one else can act without his authority. The distinction settled over the table. I had not surrendered my home to punish my son. I had protected my right to keep living in it. Claire continued. After Mr. Caldwell's death, the remaining house and eligible estate assets will pass into the Caldwell Grandchildren Legacy Trust for Ethan and Lucy. Sabrina looked at her children. Lucy is still a minor, and Ethan is only 19. We are their parents. We should have a say. Miles Chen opened the plain estate binder in front of him. They are the beneficiaries. You are not their trustee. An independent professional would protect the house and eligible assets for Ethan and Lucy. Daniel and Sabrina could not borrow against them, force a sale, direct distributions, or use trust funds for business debt. The children would gain more say as they matured. Whether they kept or sold the house, its value would remain protected. I had not replaced Daniel with two unprepared teenagers. I had replaced family pressure with a structure designed to outlast it. Miles looked at Sabrina. They are still your children. That does not make you the owner of their future inheritance. Ethan looked at me. Grandpa, I never asked you for the house. I know. That is one reason I can trust you with what it means. Lucy asked the question everyone else avoided. Does this mean Mom and Dad lose everything? They lost control of something they never owned. They do not lose their family unless they choose to. Daniel looked at her, then back at me. You made our children your heirs to punish us. I protected them because you used their names to justify a plan that gave them nothing. I am your son. Then you should have objected when your wife discussed my death as a scheduling problem. His anger gave way to something closer to shame, but not enough to make him take responsibility. We were desperate. Desperation explains why you wanted money. It does not explain why you believed my hearing loss gave you permission to begin taking it. Sabrina removed the sign from the wall. You have divided this family over a misunderstanding. You thought deafness made me absent. It only made you honest. No one opened the champagne the notary left without witnessing a signature. Claire collected the unsigned power of attorney and confirmed the deed fraud alert was active. Daniel and Sabrina left with the senior living brochure and renovation plans they had brought for a future that no longer belonged to them. My sister apologized after I showed her the title appointment and lender projection. The other relatives left quietly, having watched Daniel and Sabrina's documents contradict their speech about preserving the house. Ethan and Lucy remained at the table. I did not ask them to condemn their parents or thank me for the trust. I told them the property was still mine. The plan could change if circumstances changed. And inheritance would never be the price of visiting me. They had been used as an excuse. I would not use them as a reward. Over the following year, Daniel and Sabrina sold the remaining assets of their renovation business and entered a restructuring agreement for the debt. Without access to my house as collateral, they had to solve the problem with property they actually owned. Daniel called rarely during the first several months. Ethan continued visiting the workshop. He brought architecture assignments and asked questions about load paths, old foundations, and why I had designed the rear addition around Rose's pear tree. He never asked about the trust. Lucy helped me scan Rose's recipes and label the photographs Sabrina had wanted boxed. Some weekends she chose friends over visiting me. She was 16, not a saint assigned to comfort an old man. When she did come, it was because she wanted to, not because an inheritance required attendance. Eventually, Daniel returned alone. He stood in the workshop doorway while I repaired a drawer from Rose's sewing cabinet. Dad, I never wanted you dead. You sat beside someone who spoke as if my death were a scheduling issue. I should have stopped her. You should have remembered I was your father before you remembered the house was valuable. He looked around the workshop. Sabrina was scared about the debt. I thought if I could stabilize the business, everything else would be repaired. You were going to repair your past with my future. He accepted the sentence without arguing. Then he asked whether I would replace Miles and name him trustee again. I am still Ethan and Lucy's father. I let the silence stand for several seconds. This time, no one mistook it for agreement. No, that is a relationship, not a financial qualification. You will never trust me again. A trustee protects someone else's future. You came to me because you needed it to repair your past. I did not tell Daniel forgiveness was impossible. I told him control of the estate was no longer the place where he would prove he had changed. Some relationships can be repaired without ever becoming load-bearing again. If he wanted a relationship with me, it would have to exist without a deed waiting at the end of it. He returned twice that winter. We spoke awkwardly. Wounds did not close simply because a son finally admitted the knife existed. Daniel began helping with ordinary tasks again, but only when I asked. He repaired a loose gate without suggesting the property needed new management. He brought groceries once and left without opening an estate conversation. Those gestures did not restore the old plan. They showed the beginning of a relationship that might exist without it. Sabrina did not come. She continued describing the trust as punishment and refused to acknowledge that her own projection would have sold the house. I did not require Daniel to leave his wife in order to speak with me. I required him to stop making her financial emergency my obligation. But I separated the possibility of rebuilding a relationship from the authority to endanger the house. By spring, Rose's pear tree flowered beside the kitchen window. The house still needed paint, and the workshop roof still leaked near one corner. I repaired what I chose, when I chose, without anyone measuring the rooms behind me. Remaining in control did not make me immortal. It made the years I still had belong to me. One Sunday, Ethan spread the original plans across Rose's dining table, while Lucy sorted recipe cards into protective sleeves. The silver hearing aid case, holding the large old devices I no longer wore, rested between us. Lucy opened it and read the engraving. For every word still worth hearing, she looked at me. "Do you ever wish you had not heard what Mom said?" I thought about the kitchen, Daniel's silence, the red labels on Rose's furniture, and the title appointment arranged without my consent. No. Some words hurt because they arrive late. Those words arrived just in time. Sabrina believed my hearing loss had removed me from the conversation. It had only taught me the value of listening before answering. She waited for my death to make the house hers. I kept living long enough to make sure it never would. If your son stayed silent while his wife waited for your death, would you ever trust him with your home again? Or should love and inheritance remain permanently separate?